Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the RFP CSD Children's Services Division RFP webinar, and we're going to get started. Thank you for joining us today. I am Rima Malhotra, one of the managers here at Children's Services Division.
And I'm Tiffany Junkins, the other manager for Children's Services Division.
And then also, we have someone who's going to pop their head in, Julia Talbot, from grants. Grants? Policy and grants. All right, so let's, I do want to just talk really quickly. We're going to go through, kind of do introductions. We're going to kind of do an overview, but then we're also going to take questions at the end. Please do go ahead and type your questions in as we're going through the webinar. Most likely, though, we're going to wait to the end to respond or address those questions because we've got a lot to get through. And so where are you going to type it in? Where are you going to type the questions in or in the dashboard? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, so here's the agenda. We did our introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about Chicago Early Learning, go into Children's Services Division, review the highlights of the RFP, and then address your questions. So Chicago Department of Family Support Services Program Divisions, as you can see, has 8 divisions, and we are Children's Services. So we're one of the 8, as you can see, Youth Services, Veteran Services, Human Services Delivery, and so on. So I'm going to start with just thinking about kind of what frames our work. So the DFSS has launched the strategic framework in 2016 with a refresh mission. And so the mission, as you can see, is working with community partners, connecting Chicago residents and families to resources that build stability, support their well-being, and empower them to thrive. And the key 4 priorities, and these are really important because these priorities also parallel and connect to the work that we're doing and to the RFP that we have put out. So priority, deliver and support high quality, innovative, and comprehensive services that empower clients to thrive, to collaborate with community partners, sister agencies, and public officials on programs and policies that improve Chicagoans' lives and advance systemic change, to inform the public of resources available to them through DFSS and its community partners, and lastly, to be good stewards of DFSS's resources, steward DFSS's resources responsibly and effectively. So Chicago Early Learning, the City of Chicago made a commitment to providing children across the city with access to high quality early learning through a comprehensive citywide system of school and community-based, and it's known as Chicago Early Learning. And the city has engaged in 2 major policy shifts to facilitate access to improve this quality and early learning services in Chicago. One of them, as many of you on the webinar have experienced or familiar with, is a consolidation of funding for community-based early learning programs. And the funding consolidated under the Chicago Department of Family Support Services, Children's Services Division. And this occurred July 1st in 2017. The aim of this was to provide more cohesive, cost-effective administration of Chicago's funding for high-quality early childhood education programming outside of schools. And so that's important that the focus was programs that were in community-based organizations. And with that implementation of the consolidated funding model, the city is able to make investments in the Birth to 5 system, while also scaling full-day programming for 4-year-olds to deliver universal pre-K in both school and community-based settings. And so part of Chicago Early Learning is the Children's Services Division and all of the funding that programming that comes out of there. DFSS's Children's Services Division administers funding to all community-based Chicago Early Learning programs. DFSS CSD seeks to ensure that these programs offer both comprehensive and high-quality services for all enrolled families and children. And so building on this strong system in Chicago Early Learning and strong system of services, there are specific priorities that have come out of there. And so the priorities that CSD is focusing on is to maximize access to high quality early learning programs. This is done by matching investments to the needs of local communities and, most importantly, reducing the barriers to entry for children and families. Next is to improve the comprehensiveness and quality of early learning across all programs to ensure that children and families' needs are met. And then lastly, priorities to create a strong system of service providers by increasing support and reducing the administrative burden for community-based providers of early learning. So we talked about priorities that we have, and now we come to the goal of this specific RFP. And the goals of this RFP are to enhance and expand highly effective services to vulnerable families with children ages birth to 5, to families who are prenatal as well. For Chicago Early Learning community-based programs, to provide early learning experiences that support children's development based on their individual trajectory across the 4 main developmental domains: social, emotional, physical, language, and cognitive, with the end goal of supporting their success in school and in life. And to build a system that allows us to work together toward a clearly articulated goal of having more of our children enter kindergarten ready to succeed. So being ready to succeed in kindergarten is the most immediate outcome we have for children who have participated in Chicago Early Learning programs. So based on, we talked about priorities, we talked about the goal of the RFP, that was kind of our larger goals. And then now, based on the desired outcome of having children be on track, ready for kindergarten, this RFP aims to achieve the following 4 goals. Deliver high quality learning environments and experiences that promote children's growth, development, and kindergarten readiness across the 4 development domains that we just talked about in the previous slide: social, emotional, physical, language, and cognitive. To engage and support families by providing them with meaningful ways to interact with their children's learning and development and attain their own personal goals. To provide programs with the foundation and supports necessary for strong program design management and monitoring systems that contribute to sustained quality programming. And to employ a professionally prepared and adequately compensated workforce to help achieve the desired outcomes for children and families. And I want to say that these are 4 goals, but they can be very complicated to achieve. And one of our goals is to support everyone to be able to meet these. And so when we talk about engage and support families, it is all of the kind of requirements that we have under all of our grants, and it's beyond the checking the box. So how are families engaged is what we're looking for. Where's the intentionality in creating an environment, not only physically, but also in the people who are working with the families that optimally engage and support families. And so that goes the same with when we think about management and monitoring systems. How is the organization designed so they ultimately are looking at a cycle of understanding their programs and where are the strengths and where are the areas for growth, and how to then continue to provide support for continuous quality improvement. How do you, as a program, make your organization appealing to the workforce? Why do they want to come and work at your place? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about when we talk about these goals. So now we've laid the groundwork. We've talked a little bit about kind of our goals, our priorities. So we're going to go through specifically the funding streams that come out of Children's Services Division and that you, through the RFP, can apply to. So we have two major funding streams, the federal Head Start and the state Early Childhood Block Grant, as well as their associated requirements. Federal Head Start includes Head Start for 3 to 5-year-olds, Early Head Start for children prenatal to 3-year-olds, it says pregnant women as well, and Early Head Start Child Care Partnership for children birth to 3-year-olds. Moving on to the Early Childhood Block Grant, the two funding streams within that include Preschool for All for 3 to 5 and Prevention Initiative for birth to 3-year-olds and pregnant women. I'm going to pause here and say the opportunity to blend federal and state funding and center-based programs will support the implementation of the quality components that we've kind of talked about in our goals, and help programs serve families with the greatest need while reducing the eligibility barrier of relying on state child care funding. We understand that there still is going to be a need for center-based programs to rely on state child care funding. So I want to be clear that it's not about taking that reliance away, but that it is trying to reduce the reliance so that some families who may not be eligible for child care are able to be enrolled in the program and eventually may become eligible for child care as the family support person in the program engages with them around their kind of life goals. So we've talked about the funding streams, and now what we have are program types and service delivery models. And I'll take a minute for those of you who are not as familiar just to kind of go through that. So we have center-based care, that is specifically what we might call an early childhood education and care model offered in an Illinois state licensed facility with separate classrooms or areas for distinct age groups, birth through 5. Comprehensive services are offered, including family engagement, health, and nutrition. And the service delivery occurs at the center. We have charter schools and private schools. Again, early childhood education offered in Illinois licensed exempt facilities with separate classrooms or areas for distinct preschool groups. Comprehensive services are offered, including family engagement, health, nutrition. The service delivery occurs at the school. Family childcare homes, and this is typically done through partnerships, but early childhood education and care offered in an Illinois licensed home for children birth to 5, with comprehensive services offered, including family engagement, health and nutrition, and the service delivery occurs in the licensed childcare home. And last but not least, home-based and home visiting. Again, an early childhood development program working with parents to support them in understanding child development and their role as a parent using one of DFSS's approved evidence-based models for implementation. In addition, the programs work with parents to facilitate parents' ability to set and achieve goals for themselves and focus on their own development. Comprehensive services are offered, The service delivery is mostly in the parent's home here, except for times when parents may come together for meetings and socializations, which are groups with parents and children together, engaging in typically a child development activity. So we talked about funding streams, we talked about models and service delivery locations, and now I'm going to review a little bit about the a little bit about how you can apply, and also what you can apply for in terms of the model, depending on the funding source. So Chicago Early Learning programs may be provided through a variety of options that include what we just talked about: center-based care, licensed family child care homes, Head Start, early Head Start funding only for family child care homes, and home-based and home visiting as described in the table below. So what you see when you're looking at your monitor on the left side is category A, which is birth to 3 years old. This is the area that's mostly shaded blue. If you start to most left side, the funding source, Prevention Initiative, PI. If you go down that column, what you'll see is that if you're applying for Prevention Initiative, the model is either center-based or home-based that you can apply for or use that funding for. Now next, as we go to the next column, Early Head Start, and the service delivery model that you can use Early Head Start for is center-based, home-based, home visiting, and family child care home. And then the last column in this category A, birth to 3, is Early Head Start Child Care Partnership. And as you go down, what you'll see is that you can use that funding in the service delivery model of center-based and family child care home. So that is category A, birth to 3. Now if you move to the right of that, as you're looking at your monitor, category B, 3 and 4-year-olds, the funding, preschool for all. If you go down that column, the service delivery models for preschool for all is center-based or charter schools and private schools. And then going to the last column, Head Start, service delivery models are center-based, charter schools, private schools, home-based, home visiting, and family child care homes. Pretty much all of them for this. So to be clear, for this RFP, applicants must submit separate applications for category A, birth to 3, and category B, 3 and 4-year-olds. No more than one proposal should be submitted for each category. I do want to be clear that agencies are not required to apply for both category A and B for consideration. So target population, we're going to take a few minutes just to kind of go over the target population, and we will also talk about which funding sources may target specific or actually have a threshold for specific poverty levels and things. So eligible program participants of Chicago Early Learning programs include income and categorically eligible children under age 5 and their families and pregnant women living in the city of Chicago. So families earning below or at the federal poverty level, that's federal funding will can only use federal funding for families who are at or below the federal poverty level. For the state funding for PSA and PI, families earning up to 200% of the federal poverty level are eligible. I do want to say that always in a selection criteria, both ISB and DFSS do state that the families in highest need should be considered. And then the categorically eligible families would be families experiencing homelessness, families with foster children, families who qualify for temporary assistance to needy families, TANF, and families who qualify for Social Security Disability Income, SSDI. So I had just stated programs must demonstrate that they have a selection criteria in place that allows them to prioritize the most vulnerable families amongst the eligible service population. And proposals that support the following special subpopulations will be given priority. Immigrant, New American, and undocumented populations, pregnant women, parenting teens, mothers who have perinatal challenges due to homelessness, substance abuse, or other factors. Catching up. English language learners, children with disabilities and medical conditions, children and families experiencing homelessness, and families with incarcerated parents. So we want to take a few minutes just to focus on, we talked a little bit about also prioritizing programs to service specific subpopulations. I also want to talk a little bit about our interest in funding programs that are structured a specific way. So site-based continuity of relationships model. Agencies are encouraged to design programs along the continuity of relationship model. This is a model where children and teaching teams stay together from enrollment of the child family through transition out to either preschool or kindergarten, which would be a 5-year model from birth through age 5. So programs are also encouraged to think about something to be a little bit more innovative, which is thinking about a continuity of relationship model birth through 5. This may also be something that is interesting to families and could be something that is appealing to families. And so this would be then, again, children and teaching teams staying together birth through 5 until the children transition to kindergarten. Collaborative models. And so this is focusing on agencies to design programs and models in which there's blending of at least 2 funding sources to support a family's enrollment. So a family is enrolled in Head Start and Preschool for All, or Head Start and Child Care Assistance Program, or her Early Head Start and Prevention Initiative, and etc. So programs can, and we talk about this a little bit later, so I'll wait. I was jumping ahead. So the next is partnership and subrecipient. And so DFSS acknowledges there's strong rationale for the Head Start, Early Head Start delegates to implement services through the partner model, and will continue to encourage successful partnerships with Chicago Early Learning System, within the system. And partners are defined as subrecipients. And subrecipient is a legally recognized entity that receives a contract for the purpose of providing goods and services as specified in a written and signed contractual agreement. Agencies intending to establish partnerships for Head Start, Early Head Start, and Early Head Start Child Care partnerships must follow the guidelines of the Partnership Framework Implementation Guide in Appendix A of this RFP. And partners must indicate on their budget template the receipt of federal funds to support programming through a delegate agency. And so we want both, not only the delegate to name the partners that they're considering, but as a partner, if you're applying for state funding, but you may also be considered for federal funding through a delegate agency, please go ahead and put that in there as well. And I know Tiffany will talk more about that, but I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. So to talk a little bit more about the blending, which we had said was a model that we were encouraging, for center-based models, DFSS will prioritize proposals that demonstrate a funding structure that includes the blending of the Early Childhood Block Grant, which are PFA and PI, Preschool for All and Prevention Initiative, and Head Start, Early Head Start funding to maximize city-administered funding. Applicants are encouraged to apply across all funding streams to maximize the opportunity to blend. To meet this priority, the following can be noted. So one, applicants applying to be PFA and PI delegates can also apply to be a Head Start, Early Head Start delegate, or secure a Head Start, Early Head Start partnership with a Head Start, Early Head Start delegate. We just talked about that on the previous slide. And applicants applying to be Head Start, Early Head Start delegates can apply to be PFA and PI delegates. There are no partnerships allowed for the Early Childhood Block Grant for PFA or PI funding. And I also do want to note, although we are prioritizing and encouraging blending, we are also considering programs who may only apply for one funding source. So I want to make sure people are encouraged to apply, even if you're going to be only applying for one funding source.
That's a great point, Rima. So an agency who applies for PFA or PI funding, they cannot sub-grant, right, to someone else.
That's right.
So all of our PFA and PI delegates, they have to receive the grant directly from DFSS.
That is right. Yep. Yep.
Great.
Excuse me. So there have been some key revisions to Chicago Early Learning Standards, and those of you on the webinar who have been a delegate with us are familiar with the Chicago Early Learning Standards. So we've revised the Chicago Early Learning Standards to ensure that all delegate agencies maintain compliance with funder regulations, excuse me, as well as implement high-quality programming. While these revisions continue to support the implementation of the consolidated funding model, City of Chicago is committed to ensuring adequate time and technical assistance for adequate implementation of these requirements. So most of these standards are based on one of the funding sources requirements. As we had talked about during consolidation, our goal was to develop quality standards that went with the highest standard of each of the funding sources. And that's what you're going to see here. And you can find them in the RFP starting on page 20 through 22. So programs should be ready to show a plan and a willingness to implement these quality standards, indicating the support you need and what will be necessary for each site or agency. Key changes to the Chicago Early Learning Standards and requirements, excuse me, in addition to the funding requirements and the highest quality indicator of each of those funders, is also the Chicago Early Learning Consolidation Plan to align quality standards across funding streams, changes to the Head Start Performance Standards, the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, and the Accelerate Goals Circle of Quality Standards.
So guidance for our applicants with Category A, as Rima had stated before, our Category A is going to be applicants applying for birth to 3 and also including pregnant women as well. So please note the following funding stream restrictions. In order to receive PI funding, an applicant must directly apply to this RFP. Again, it cannot be sub-granted when it comes to our Early Childhood Block Grant funding. In order to receive Early Head Start or Early Head Start CCP funding, an applicant can either apply to this RFP or partner with a delegate agency that applies to the RFP. Applicants are encouraged to identify delegate and partner relationships for federal funding. And note that this is in the narrative response and budget. So category A, the birth to 3 years old and including pregnant moms. Applicants can apply for early Head Start. You can apply for early Head Start as it relates to providing home-based services. You can apply for early Head Start as it relates to center-based. And you can also apply for early Head Start as it pertains to family child care homes. It is entirely up to the applicant if they want to apply for the 3 different variations of the early Head Start. You can apply for one or the other or a combination, but it's up to the applicant. Also, for early Head Start Child Care Partnership, you can apply for the CCP program through the community-based platform or the Family Child Care Home platform. Again, it's up to the agency who's applying to decide if they wanted to do one or the other or a combination of the both. Also, when it comes to category A, prevention initiatives. So prevention initiatives can be applied for by center-based and also our home-based home visiting option. So those are the options for applying for category A. As Rima stated before, you can apply for this category for birth to 3, including pregnant women, and that's one way to apply through category A. You don't have to apply for all 3 early Head Start, and CCP and prevention initiative. It is entirely up to the applicant to determine which ones you want to apply for. So category A, implementation of the center-based model. Prevention initiative is an option, as well as early Head Start and early Head Start Child Care Partnership. So those all 3 complement the center-based model. The implementation of the home visiting or home-based model is for the funding streams for prevention initiative as well as early Head Start. There is no CCP or early Head Start Child Care Partnership option available here, okay? The implementation for a family child care home model is for the funding stream of early Head Start, also early Head Start Child Care Partnership. Make sure you pay very close attention to the options of the models that are available to you. The important reminder we wanted to note was for center-based and family child care homes, early Head Start and early Head Start Child Care Partnership cannot be combined together. For family child care home, prevention initiative is not an eligible funding source. For for home-based and home visiting, early Head Start and prevention initiative cannot be blended together to support the same family. Very important. All right, so now we get into the guidance for the applicants for category B. Category B, as Rima had stated earlier, is for applicants applying to serve children 3 to 5. So please note the following funding stream restrictions. In order to receive Preschool for All funding, an applicant must directly apply to this RFP. That's because you cannot subgrant our early childhood block grant funding. You have to receive it directly through DFSS. In order to receive Head Start funding, an applicant can either apply to this RFP or partner with a delegate agency that applies to this RFP. Applicants are encouraged to identify delegate partner relationships for federal funding, and note that this is in the narrative response and called out in the budget. So category B, again, for 3 and 4-year-olds, applicants can apply for Head Start, and you can apply for that by way of the home-based and home visiting model. You can also apply for it as a center-based option. You can apply as a charter school or private school, in addition to the family child care home option. Applicants can apply for Preschool for All or PFA through the center-based option and also charter school and private school. So a little bit more about Category B, implementation of the full day center-based model. So it includes the PSA, or Preschool for All, and Head Start. The implementation of half-day center-based model is for Head Start only. We want to call this out and make sure that programs understand that our Preschool for All funding will not support the half-day center-based model. The implementation of charter school and private school model is for our PFA, Preschool for All, and Head Start models. The implementation of home visiting and home-based model is for Head Start. And please note that these programs will be limited as Chicago aims to maximize the full-day preschool opportunities. An important reminder is the half-day Head Start, again, cannot be blended with our PFA model.
So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about performance measures that we have listed in the RFP. And so I'll go through them side by side. One performance measure that we're going to look at is design and implement learning environments and practices that support children's development across, as you've heard this now probably for the fourth time, 4 developmental domains that have been identified as key to children's kindergarten readiness: social, emotional, physical, language, and cognitive. Agencies must have an average composite score of 4.5 across the class, Eckers, Sickers, and ITERS assessments, with no single classroom falling below a score of 4. So we're talking about once a applicant has been awarded, these are the performance measures that we'll be looking at. Site leaders that participate in site-based instructional coaching model sessions, and site leaders who participate in site-based instructional coaching demonstrate implementation of coaching indicators outlined by the instructional support service providers. Next. The second is design and implement programs that support families and provide them meaningful ways to interact with their children's learning and development and promote homeschool connection. So what you'll notice is that these performance measures are connected to the goals that we outlined in the beginning, right? So parent education curriculum implemented with validity, parents as teachers or baby talk. At least 80% of all families who entered the program during the year are still enrolled at the end of the program year. And center-based and family childcare home have teaching strategies goals. Parent portal is utilized on a regular basis. The third performance measure is design and implement a program management and monitoring infrastructure that fully supports quality learning environments and parent and family engagement. We're looking for an overall average score of 5.0 or higher on the program administration scale. Parent and staff satisfaction surveys that demonstrate 85% overall satisfaction and demonstrate growth in areas from previous year. For programs that have a baseline information on the 5E survey that assesses effective leaders, collaborative teachers, involved families, supportive environment, and ambitious instruction. And so this is something that we will be rolling out. We haven't done this yet, and so we've added it to our performance measure, knowing that we have a goal to roll this initiative out. And then improved and reduced staff turnover rate.
All right, so we're super excited to talk about the budget template that you will be using to apply for this RFP. We're extremely excited to let you know that when we first kind of began this process, we were talking about, having to have maybe 5 different budgets be submitted for our 5 different programs. And so we're super excited to be able to say that you only have to submit one budget template, whether you're applying for category A, whether you're applying for category B, or whether you're applying for both category A and B. So the 2 budget templates that are available to you on the website will be agencies who plan on applying with 15 or less sites. That will be the one that will be most commonly used. Also agencies with 60 sites or less. That would be for the agencies who have over 15 sites and they plan on applying for the RFP, then obviously they will have that tool to use. If there's any agencies out there who need more than 60, then you need to make sure that you're contacting Rima Malhotra by the email that has been provided so that we understand what the need is. Just wanted to kind of just do a quick overview of the fact that any proposed costs within your RFP, we need to make sure, and you need to make sure that they're going to be necessary for the operations of your program. In its most general sense, everything that you're putting into that budget, whether it's personnel, whether it's non-personnel, there has to be a necessity for it when you're talking about operating our early childhood programming. Also, all costs must be reasonable, and determining what's reasonable, looking at similar costs around the region when it comes to the geographic location that we're in. Just wanted to make sure that as you're providing costs or thinking about how you're going to fully maximize or utilize your operational budget, that you're taking into consideration the fact that costs must be reasonable. Also, that costs are going to be allowable according to our cost principles, and making sure that that these are things that are allowable to our different program models, which means you have to know a little bit about the funding that's being offered to know if it's going to be allowable by our grants. Our Head Start programs, even though we often may just say Head Start, of course it includes Early Head Start and also Early Head Start CCP, but what may be allowable to that grant may be different than what's allowable to our Early Childhood Block Grant through our Preschool for All and Prevention Initiative programs. So we expect you to do a little research and be able to kind of look what those program compliances and also cost principles are also stating. And then, is it allocable? It's allocable, and if it is stated within your plan, and so we want to make sure that your plan is going to be a comprehensive plan about what you need, whether it's personnel or whether it's non-personnel. So the budget template, we encourage you to look at all the tabs in the budget template. And we want you to start with your budget template in the order in which the tabs are presented. So the very first tab is going to give you detailed instructions. We're encouraging you to read those instructions very carefully. If you do have questions, again, make sure that you are utilizing the questions that you can ask here to ask specific questions. We will be putting out an RFQ to address as many questions as we can. We will also be having bidders conferences as well, where we'll be having questions, I'm sure, there as well. So again, read the instructions, read them carefully. If you have a specific question, let us know. We're going to go into a little of what the instructions entail, but very high level. There is an instructions tab. The next tab you'll see will be the agency tab. And so the agency tab, the main focus of that is for the overall agency, whether you're a single site or whether you're multi-site, is to be able to propose the number of slots, number of children, right, that you intend on serving, and also the funding, the proposed funding that's going to be attached to it. So that's an opportunity for you to kind of give us a very high level overview of the intentionality of what you're applying for on the agency tab. The next tab is really for DFSS analysis, and it's called the admin tab, the administrative tab. We want you to utilize this because we want to know administratively a little bit more about your program. There's going to be some positions within your program that may be considered agency-wide positions, and those may be things like your executive director. Maybe it's really hard to pinpoint the exact, narrow it down the funding source, and maybe somebody like an executive director would be split across all funding sources. But if there's just one funding source, then that's fine too. How much time is that person going to be dedicated then to a particular funding source is what we need you to start thinking about as you, create this operational budget for your program. The next tab, again, it's for DFSS analysis, but it's targeting other sources of funds. So there will be built into this opportunities for you to tell us about other funding that you receive that helps support your program, whether it's through a different grantee, maybe perhaps you're getting funding through a different Head Start grantee, or maybe you yourself are a grantee. If there's other funding streams that are supporting the work that you do, such as United Way, other private source fundings, we want to know about it. And so we're asking that you go ahead and put any other funding sources that benefit the programs in which you plan on applying, that you list them under this tab. The next tab will be the miscellaneous Head Start only tab. And this is applicable only to Head Start proposals. And I want to be very clear, only Head Start, not Early Head Start, and not Early Head Start Child Care Partnership. This funding is only available through the Head Start option. And on this particular tab, we're asking you to think about and state if you need additional funding to be able to support some supplemental positions we've been able to provide in the past, such as disability paraprofessionals, health aides, and data management aides. If that's something that your program is interested in, then we want you to go ahead and state that on this particular tab. Also, the next tab to look out for will be the Site tab. And like I said, the most commonly used budget template will be the 1 through 15 Site tab. Each tab, we are going to be asking for you to let us know if you're operating a site directly, if you're doing it through a partnership or family child care home. And our home-based can be grouped according to cluster, but this will give you an opportunity to let us know at each site a little bit more about that site. And we'll go into that a little bit more detail. If you, say for instance, only have 3 sites and there's 15 tabs available, you only need to go ahead and complete the 3 tabs. The next tab that I want to talk about is the cost roll-up tab. The cost roll-up tab is going to be the tab that is going to provide you with a budget summary. So after you've entered all the information in all of the other tabs, the cost roll-up is really going to be used for entering into the e-procurement system for Category A for infants and toddlers, and also Category B for 3 to 5. So again, it's going to be that summary of each of these program options that you're going to be applying for. The last tab I want to talk about is the narrative tab. And so we want you to complete the sections that are highlighted in yellow to really personalize your narrative. A lot of the budget information is all automatically going to roll into the narrative, but anything that's in the highlighted sections, such as the full-time equivalent, FTEs, and any of the narratives that's listed under each cost category, that's what we need you to be able to explain to us your justification and your narrative. And this is where you get to really personalize your vision. So the budget template instructions. Again, we encourage you to read these instructions, but just calling out some things in here that I want to pay close attention to. So again, it's only one Excel budget template. And so if you're applying for, let's say, Category A, then you would only need to complete the Category A sections of this particular budget template throughout. Category A is for birth through 3, including pregnant women. So early Head Start and home base, we want you to let us know if you want to serve. You have to propose the number of children that you plan on servicing in this category, if any. Again, early Head Start as well, and our Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, Prevention Initiative, center-based, as well as Prevention Initiative home-based. Again, if you plan on applying for Category A, you let us know what the plan is and, where do you see yourself fitting in those categories and how many children you plan on serving in those categories. You do not have to complete every section, only complete the section where you intend on submitting a proposal to serve. Next is going to be Category B. So if you don't intend on applying for Category A, and maybe you only are interested in serving 3 to 5, then this is the section for you. It's going to be in blue, and you can have the option of the Head Start home base, and letting us know, how many children you plan on serving with that option, if any, and the Head Start full day, as well as the Head Start half day. And then preschool for all. So those options will be available to you according to your plan. And so I just want to go ahead and reiterate that you can do one or the other, or you can do both. So Category A and B together, which means that you're going to be completing Category A for the infants and toddlers, and you're going to be completing then Category B for the preschool age children. We want you to use that same budget template, and then you would upload the same budget template with each proposal if you choose to do Category A and B combined. So now we want to go ahead and go into some of the warning messages. When you get some of our alerts in red and we're saying, hey, you have to pay attention to certain things. Wanted to call out some of the things that you might see, such as positions that exceed the executive level 2 salary cap. Currently, as of January 2019, the executive level 2 salary cap is $189,600. So a position that exceeds that amount, you're going to get an over income message, and we just need you to remove that position. If there was an error in typing in the amount, please go ahead and make the correction, but do not ignore the over income warning message, because any positions that are remaining in your budget form, they will not roll over into the cost roll up. So we need you to address it, or else your budget could be off. So make sure that the warning signs that you see, that you're addressing them so that you can get a proper budget for submittal. The next warning message I wanted to warn you about was when the budget would exceed the allocated amount. So keep in mind that this is a proposal. So you're submitting the proposal. We're not telling you that this is how much you have of an allocation. You're telling us this is how much based on the number of children you want to serve in which category. So the allocation is really going to be derived from you. But whatever that allocation is, it has to match, right, with the number of children that you're planning that you would like to serve, and also then what that bottom line would need to be. So there still has to be a match and a checks and balance there. So if you are exceeding the amount that you're proposing, then look out for the over allocated warning message, because you need to make sure that you're making the necessary modifications to ensure that your budget is going to match the allocation. The administrative costs, if they exceed the maximum that's allowed, keep in mind our different programs. Our federal option, the federal option administrative cap for any delegate or prospective delegate would be 10%. And so we want to make sure that you're aware that is the administrative cap. It is listed in our request for proposal, RFP. But also, if you're applying for our early childhood block grant funding, that the admin cap is 5%. And because it's two different administrative costs, I want you to be mindful that you may get an error message in one and maybe not the other, or maybe even both. If there is an administrative cost that are exceeding the maximum threshold, it must be addressed before you submit. The next warning message will be for our non-federal match. So all of the federal funded programs must meet a minimum threshold of 1/3. So if we're giving you, let's say $1, in federal funds, then we expect for 1/3 of that to be matched with a non-federal source. And if it's not, then you're going to get an insufficient error message. And we need you to pay attention to that to ensure that you have enough match that's being proposed in your overall budget proposal. Another warning message that we want you to adhere to is just making sure that any place where there's going to be a flag, something that is kind of off to the side, stating that something is wrong, please do not ignore it, okay? We need you to make sure that you're making all the corrections prior to finalizing your budget. The bottom line is some of the error message will cause your cost roll-up not to be accurate until you actually resolve those issues. So don't finalize your budget until the corrections have been made. Just wanted to go ahead and point out with our budget template, we want you to, again, complete the template in the tab order as received when you downloaded it. Also, we just want to make sure that you understand that with all of our federal program options, that the non-federal match is applicable. There is no non-federal match required for our early childhood block grant funding. All right, so then some more budget template instructions. Then we're going to kind of go into the agency tab, right? So on the agency tab, please make sure that you're using your legal entity's name. That's going to be required. I know sometimes we have a tendency to do abbreviations or nicknames. We really need that legal entity name to be entered. Also, a summary of your proposed revenue and expenditures need to appear on your agency tab. So again, the intended revenue is pretty much you identifying those programs that you intend on applying for, and also the dollar amounts that are attached to those would make up the intended or proposed revenue. The proposed number of children served for each program option, just make sure that you're paying, close attention to that, as that is going to be the very high level kind of overview of your intentionality when applying for this RFP. The administrative costs, we just wanted to kind of call out what you'll see if you got an error message here. So in red, you can see your budgeted admin cost exceeds the federal limitation. There will be a different error message if you're exceeding the early childhood block grant administrative costs. So non-federal match, wanted to show you again what that error message would look like. Since there's a 1/3 requirement of the federal dollar, if your match came in at under 1/3 or 33%, then you would get this error message. Your matching fund is insufficient. So these are some of the things that you can kind of look out for when you're completing that agency tab. So the admin tab, we wanted to make sure that program-specific administrative limits are adhered to. We talked about the 10% for federal and also the 5% for our state The administrative costs will cover the agency-wide management functions of accounting, human resources, information technology, any type of coordination and direction and planning that's required for your agency-wide management functions. I know I had mentioned before about like the executive director, but you have other positions within your organization, perhaps like a CFO, that would also be considered an organization-wide management function. So I challenge you just to make sure that your admin tab is representing those positions specific to your agency that are going to be shared organizational-wide. The administrative costs, personnel, and also non-personnel that support your agency across all of your early childhood programs must be listed in this section. Again, that's going back to that organizational-wide. There's going to be some non-personnel, obviously, too, for your headquarters or central office that need to be considered and budgeted. So each position that's budgeted, whether it's budgeted in whole or in part with our funding streams, you must be able to show 100% of their salary. So this is important for us to make sure that the executive level 2 salary cap is not exceeded. So even if it's being paid for other sources of funds, there is a section for you to let us know what percentage of funds that is outside of our early childhood funds. But each position listed must equal 100% of the salary so that we understand the full complexity of what you're applying for in relationship to the other sources of funds within your organization. So the total salary in column D on the spreadsheet must equal to the total allocation that's in column S. The next thing on the admin tab would be shared services. So every agency is going to be required to have a cost allocation plan when they're operating 2 or more programs. So when costs are assigned to 2 or more programs, you have to have a way or a method already pre-established as to how those costs would be assigned, what your base looks like for allocating your resources. And traditionally, you know, we've seen FTEs be used. We've seen other things such as maybe square foot when it pertains to space. So your cost allocation plan would really call this out when costs are assigned to 2 or more programs. And this is going to be important, especially when we're talking about layering funds and having more than one funding source perhaps support the same child. The other thing on the admin tab I want to call out is the fringe rate. The default that's entered is 25%, but this is something that can be adjusted to fit your organization's need. And so those adjustments can be made from the admin tab. So some additional budget template instructions. We're going to go into other sources of funding on that tab. Again, if you are a grantee, we want you to disclose this information in that section. There's going to be other things as well, other funds that may be received, but there is opportunity for you to let us know what other sources of funds are also supporting your program and calling it out to our attention and being open and transparent about any other funding sources supporting the programs that you are applying for our funding for. The next tab I want to talk about is the miscellaneous Head Start tab. I mentioned the fact that there's supplemental positions, and they do really depend on the funding that we have available. But this will be the opportunity for you to let us know when it pertains to these supplemental positions, disabilities paraprofessionals, health aides, and data management aides, for you to let us know if these are positions that you would like to benefit from. And if so, you would have to provide the quantity and also add a program and budget justification for each of the positions that you are making the argument that you still need, or if you're new, that you would like. So our disability paraprofessionals work in the classroom. with our children who may have special needs and need special accommodations. And we want to make sure that that if there's programs who need the disability paraprofessionals, and you have not put them in your base proposal, and if there's opportunities for us to fund positions like this, then we want to know what those needs are. Also, the health aid, when it pertains to anything that's going to be health related and helping to get information into our database to ensure that we understand where our children and families are as it relates to any of the health concerns. If that particular aid is needed and you did not put them in your base proposal, then you can indicate on the supplemental tab only for the Head Start program that you would like to utilize these supplemental positions. You need to indicate the quantity, and you need to also write a meaningful justification. The data management aid is also a position that has to deal with data entry into our data management system. And so if this is something that agencies who are applying for the Head Start funding stream, they would like to request, again, the quantity must be listed and also the justification for it. The last thing regarding the miscellaneous tab, there's an opportunity for you to let us know historically. We have given an allocation year after year to agencies for parent out of town travel. And the purpose of parent out of town travel is to give the policy committee members and parent at large an opportunity to go to out of town conferences when it comes to the Head Start program. If this is something that you would desire, then you need to complete what that proposed amount would be and what is the justification for it. Please feel free to take the liberty to call out specific conferences that you would like parents to attend. Don't be shy. Go ahead and state in here and provide an explanation. And for programs where perhaps they haven't received this funding in the past, and this will be something that's new to them, please make sure that, again, this is something that you can propose to us that you would like. But it's intended for parents to go on out-of-town travel experiences through a plethora of conferences that would support the early childhood programs. So the site tab. Our site tab, we're excited. Again, our 15 tab and less is going to be the most popular option. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that you had to budget for each site separately. So don't combine sites. We want you to call out specifically what community area a site is in. So there will be a drop-down list dedicated to that. We want you to call out which ward your site is in as well. There is a space for you to enter the DCFS license number for that particular site. And also, there is an option for you to let us know if you plan on directly operating the site or currently directly operating the site, if you anticipate partnering with the site at this location, if it is a current partner of yours and you plan on continuing that relationship, if it's a family child care home. So the option tab, make sure that you utilize that drop-down list to let us know what the intention is. Make sure that when you are proposing your budget, that no positions are going to be budgeted below the minimum wage for the city of Chicago as of July 2019. So the minimum wage will be $13 an hour, and we're asking for you to make sure that you're not using the current minimum wage, but that you're thinking about that July 2019 increase when you're submitting. Also, no positions can be added to the budget that exceed the executive level 2 salary cap as mentioned before, which is $189,600 annual. And this does include any potential bonuses or any other salaries that would be taken into consideration. You know, if someone is receiving over $189,600, that position must be removed from your budget. Also, on the site tab, there is a place for you to add the number of children proposed to be served at this site. So this is something that, you know, in your agency tab, when you're letting us know overall how many children you want to serve, in the site tabs, it has to be a match, right? All of the sites that you intend on applying has to match then what's on that agency tab. So in this particular case, each site tab needs to be very specific about what you intend on serving at that particular site. And so this could be different for some. We also want you to make sure that each position that you're listing it separately. There is no lumping of the same titles, and each position must be listed separately. The one feature that we wanted to make sure that we added in this budget template was the classrooms. So there is a place for you to put classroom numbers for each position. And so we expect that our teaching staff, when you're listing a teacher, teacher assistant, teacher aide, and even perhaps the paraprofessional or something of that nature, if they're specific to a classroom, please indicate the classroom number at that particular site, so that we understand the intentionality that went behind this RFP, with letting us know the classroom that's been licensed for the age category that you're proposing. If there are positions that you're going to add to the site tab that are not classroom positions, feel free to use in the site field, in the classroom field, you can use site if it's site specific, or if it's agency specific, go ahead and use agency specific. Also, personnel and non-personnel, it must be cost allocated only if you're applying for 2 or more programs. So if you're only applying for a single funding source here, or if there aren't any other outside sources, right, that's being considered. But if there's at least 2 funding sources, then you must be able to show how costs are being allocated across personnel and non-personnel. So each of our tabs are set up whereas they are considering the percentage that's dedicated to each of the different program models. So the cost roll-up tab, again, this is going to be a summary. And if you look at the highlight for subtotal category A, and we've also called out then the subtotal for category B. This is very important because when you're entering information into the e-procurement system, the iSupplier information, the budget subtotals for category A, if you are applying for category A, would need to be entered. And then likewise, right, if you're entering in the subtotals for category B, I just wanted to call it out here to say, this is the information that will be entered into e-procurement iSupplier. We'll have cost categories there, and they specifically align to our city cost codes that we're using for personnel, fringe, operating costs, et cetera. So, you know, even though our budget template is full of very interesting things, it all really boils down to these few lines that we need to have entered. The other thing I want to call out, though, is if any of your cost categories you did not budget for in the proposal, there is an opportunity for you in iSupplier to enter $1. And that's going to be important that you do this. We're calling it a dollar budget. So if anything is going to be blank, just go ahead and add $1 to iSupplier to ensure that that line is going to be reserved for you at a later date. You may not need it now, but maybe you might need it later, and this will really help out when it comes to any purchase orders that we will create later. So the narrative. So information from the agency and the cost roll-up tab will be auto-populated in the blue cell. So you don't need to change it. You can't change it. It's going to be locked. This information will kind of roll right into the narrative. What I need your help with is making sure that all of the yellow cells, that they're updated to reflect your proposed program. Let us know how many teachers you have in terms of FTEs, full-time equivalent, right? Assistant teachers or teacher assistants, home visitors, and any other positions. We need you to let us know, based on this proposal, your plan, what this looks like in terms of not just the dollar amount, but the staff that's going to be allocated to ensure the vision of what you're applying for, is designed in a way that it's going to be supported through enough resources, right? We also want to ensure that you provide very detailed description and justification for each cost category. So under the personnel section, there'll be a place for you to be descriptive. Under the fringe section, as well as any of our other cost categories, we really need you to be detailed. So the tabs, they are password protected in some cases. When it comes to the narrative pieces, even though you can't add in additional lines, you can adjust the height of each of the yellow sections to fit your needs. So that's an opportunity for you to expand your narrative to fit the description that you need to be able to provide to communicate to us how you plan on operating your program operationally, and how your budget is going to set within all of the program goals that you're defining. And I think that about, concludes the budget section. If you have questions, make sure that you're dropping them, your questions, as we intend on addressing those at the end and through the RFQ process as well. FAQ. I'm sorry, FAQ. Frequently asked questions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Tiffany. So we're going to just quickly go over the selection criteria. There's 4 of them. And to begin with the strength of proposed program. And I want to also make sure I emphasize that the questions in the RFP are aligned. So there are questions under each of these selection criteria that Julia will talk a little bit more about, but I just want to kind of go through this. So the strength of proposed program is one of the selection criteria, and as you can see, it's the applicant being able to demonstrate a very clear understanding of the target population for your organization, and specifically the needs and challenges that you have determined for your community and for your organization. The applicant clearly defining services to be provided, so directly or through partnerships, linkage agreements with other agencies, and so this is really important. We talk a lot about community partnerships, and so not the partners, the subrecipients, but partnerships with programs and agencies in your community that can provide support to your children and families. The applicant's proposed program is supported by strong national or local evidence-based data and or aligns with best practices for the relevant program models. Then next is including evidence of capacity to implement program requirements, curriculums, tools, and services with fidelity and responsive to family and children needs. The applicant that has an effective approach to identifying and retaining program participants. What are some policies and procedures in your program, and or how do you know that your approach is effective? And so including some of that. The applicant has demonstrated understanding of the community, landscape, and services and contexts in which they are providing these services. So the second selection criteria is program performance, outcomes, and quality. So going through the first one, the applicant demonstrates evidence of strong past performance towards achieving desired outcome goals and performance metrics and/or other notable accomplishments in providing services to the target population. And so although the strength of the program talked a little bit about understanding the data and your program, this goes much more deeply, the questions that are aligned to this. Again, to see how has your organization evaluated your program and its ability to meet the goals. And for some applicants that maybe there's no previous experience working with children and families in this context, the applicant should provide a clear rationale for its ability to execute and achieve desired outcomes for children and families. The applicant has the relevant staff, systems, and processes needed to collect key participant and performance data and evaluate and manage performance. And so I think this would be, of course, in questions that are answered, but also, as Tiffany had talked about, in your budget too, it would be something that's very relevant. The applicant has experience using data to inform, improve its services or practices, design program plan, and evaluate efficacy of the program services with children and families. The applicant demonstrates the ability to use data to inform and individualize delivery of educational and family support services to children and families, including coaching models to support staff and job-embedded professional development. And so what you'll see kind of a theme here is using data to ensure or understand your own program's performance, and are you meeting those outcomes, and are you kind of implementing quality indicators, and if not, how do you go back and kind of readjust and course correct so that you are on this path of continuous quality improvement. The third selection criteria is organizational capacity. So the applicant has qualified staff responsible for program operations, oversight, management, fiscal oversight, fundraising, grant management. So kind of your whole organization from A to Z. The applicant has adequate systems and processes to support reporting and monitoring for government contracts, including sufficient access to technology to support the administration of the program requirements. And the kind of sufficient technology goes, from the classroom or to kind of, let's say, even the home visitor, kind of being able to enter data or enter information on children's development or on family goals, to kind of the more fiscal and budget information and contractual. The applicant has quality experience working with the target population and has relevant capabilities, partnerships, and/or infrastructure needed to serve this group. Again, if no prior experience, the applicant can articulate related experience. And again, there are questions that are aligned with this that you've seen probably in the RFP that get to these criteria. And the last one under organizational capacity is the applicant's organization reflects and engages the diverse people within the communities it serves and is reflective of the children and families served. The agency makes demonstrated efforts to elevate community representatives in leadership roles meaningful to the organization. And so it's important to talk about how you focused on this, what are some procedures you put in place or policies that directly relate to this criteria. And then the last, which comes off of the budgeting that we just talked about, the last criteria is reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. And so the applicant demonstrates reasonable implementation costs, funding requests relative to its financial and human resources, and that the proposed budget supports the proposed scope of work or work plan. There has to be a really direct connection to that. Program demonstrates ability to meet the minimum staff salary requirements and adequate staffing levels to meet caseload and supervision ratios in line with the size of the program and outline program partnerships. Overall, the applicant is fiscally sound, as evidenced by the financial history and record of the organization, as well as audited financial statements or the equivalent from the current fiscal year. The applicant proposes a reasonable cost per person or per unit given the nature of the services provided and provides justification for the level of funding requested. And so I'm actually going to point this out, that this actually is not necessarily relevant because we are providing the cost per child for the funding sources. But I think connected to what Tiffany was talking about, when you also think about salaries,
Go
ahead.
Yeah, and also just when you're thinking about shared costs, right, and different services that you might provide. Rima mentioned linkage agreements and partnerships out in community, and maybe some services that you might take advantage of, just making sure that those costs are going to be reasonable when you're considering kind of breaking it down to, you know, maybe the per child level or even per unit level, just making sure that that it's going to be a reasonable representation of the funds that you're requesting.
Great. The applicant demonstrates ability to run program with available funding, including additional funding sources identified. The applicant has demonstrated an understanding of the relationship between funding sources and target population eligibility. And then lastly, the applicant leverages other non-city funds to support total program and administrative cost. So for example, state, federal, foundation, corporate, individual donations. And so much of this, I know Tiffany talked about going over when she reviewed the budget template. So just to highlight one more time that there's in-person bidders conference sessions, and you see them up on April 11th, 2019, from 10 to 1, Woodson Library. April 12th, 9:30 to 12:30, Kennedy King College. April 16th, noon to 3, at Truman College. And then on that same day, but in the evening, 5 to 8 at Malcolm X College. And those are the next 4 bidders conference opportunities. And we're going to go ahead and volley this to Julia Halbert, who's going to talk a little bit more of the technical pieces about the application.
Right. Well, thank you. So we've covered the RFP and what the scope is, and we've covered the budgets and how to kind of manage the budgeting form. What I'm going to talk about is really, as Rima indicated, the technical aspects of like, how do you actually do all of these things? And the number one way that you do this is that you get an account in iSupplier. You are not, I see we've been kind of looking at some of the questions along the, you know, as the talking has been going on. I see a lot of like, well, where do I find this form? Where do I find that form? I don't see it. It is all has been uploaded into iSupplier. If you don't have access to iSupplier, you are not going to be able to you're not going to be able to see those forms until you get access. As indicated in lots of documents, legal ad, all sorts of stuff, to register for iSupplier, it's about, you register, you get an email back. It takes about 3 days, so you need to budget for that if you haven't gotten it. If anybody is just chomping at the bit, you know, you may email me and I can see about forwarding a document to you. But all of the documents mentioned, the budget forms, the budget instructions, the attachments, the RFP itself, some of the budget forms that, some of the forms that we have from OBM, the conflict of interest form per se, those are all really, you only find them in iSupplier. You can only in the e-procurement via your iSupplier thing. So to prepare people, this is a complicated RFP. It's a complicated scope. It's a complicated budget. I don't think the application questions are necessarily complicated, but it's hard. This is a real lift for all of us, I think. And so what I really want to talk about is how you're going to get into iSupplier. I want everybody to start early. You ask your questions when people have called me, and they've called already. when they ask and they say, well, what should I do? And I said, well, come to the webinar and probably plan on coming to one of the in-person pre-submittal conferences. At that point, Tiffany will be there to really answer specific questions that you might have about the budget. Rima will be there to talk about specific questions you might have on the scope, as well as some other people from the department. We have Graylin McLaren from OBM coming in to really do troubleshooting on if you're having problems with iSupplier, if you're having questions about e-procurement. That being said, we do have in terms of iSupplier and e-procurement access, we do have quite a number of resources available to you online or through email or through the phone. As you can see on the screen, if you have questions on registration, you go to the e-procurement support at cityofchicago.org. If you have questions about technical assistance, specifically talking about e-procurement for delegate agencies, you either email or call. I will say this I think there's only, the hotline is only open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I think there are 2 or 2.5 people who staff it. At the highest, there were 270 of you on this webinar, so be patient. If you're not getting responses, then you need to call. That's a good time to email or shoot me, leave me a voicemail or call me and let me know what's going on, so we can assure that you're getting the help that you need. But this is, that you have a little over a month to complete this. This is a technically complex experience that we're asking you to go through, and so start early, ask your questions often. And then when you're talking about, if you're having problems with e-procurement, that you have, there's a whole bunch of training providers, and I can't look and talk at the same time. So we have a whole bunch of training, we have a whole bunch of PowerPoints and webinars that are online that you can already go to. To that end, I did actually upload to the DFSS website 4 different documents I got from OBM. So if you are looking for things, if you're already feeling overwhelmed, go to the DFSS website, and underneath this RFP, we have a very nice document on contact instructions to all the different e-procurement help support systems. We have supplier FAQs, which is generally how do you manage the supplier, the iSupplier website and the e-procurement website, and that will take you from getting your account set up all the way through invoicing if you already are a contractor and have invoicing things. We also have the delegate agency iSupplier presentation, which really talks a lot about setting up a grant application, how to do some basic, really good information about what we're looking for in terms of responses, and also, just how to manage the whole thing. So when we're talking about, could you go back a slide? So just to do that, in addition to e-procurement training, as I mentioned, Graylin McLaren is going to be at our in-person pre-submittal conferences, which are the end of this week and next week. He won't be there on the evening one, I know. But in addition to that, his office, the Office of Budget Management, offers these trainings on the following days. You can see there's a 9 to 12 session, which covers online bidding, which is what you guys are going to be more concerned with. There is a 1 to 4 session, which is about invoice creation, which is for people with existing contacts. To register, you would go to the Sign Up Genius address. We're going to be posting this webinar online. It will be on our YouTube channel, and the PowerPoint gets posted to the DFSS website, so you should be able to access all of these things. I think now I'm ready to go to the next slide. So when we were talking about, we're talking about doing your application, I think I've said register into iSupplier as soon as possible. When you get in, review your RFP narrative, review the application questions. The way that we develop these RFPs is we look at the scope. Out of the scope flows our evaluation and selection criteria. Out of this evaluation and selection criteria flow our application questions, which are then we double check, make sure they're aligned with the scope. And out of that flows our evaluation. All of these things are linked together. And so if you're having a question about, like, I don't get this question, I don't really understand what the answer that how I should be directing my thinking on this, and especially because this is a complicated scope, really go back to the scope, because that's where you're going to get keys and clues from us about what we are really looking for, what is the job that we want you to do, and then you can align that with what is, what you are doing and what you can provide and how it really goes in with your mission and what you guys, what you want to do in terms of running the business that is, your child care programming. So in that, it all rolls up, and I can't also emphasize enough using spell check, both because, you always want to put your best self forward, but also because if you're like me, half the time stuff auto-corrects to a word that is a word. It might work or it might not, and so everybody's had that experience. So it's hard to read and edit your own materials, but really try to use spell check, try to get somebody to read over this stuff and make sure that what you're saying is actually what you're saying, and not like me, like some weird spell check, kind of amended version of what you sort of am saying. I think, as we've discussed, in terms of working in e-procurement, you can submit, and many of you will submit multiple applications from this single RFP. The glitch to the e-procurement system is that the application, each unique application has to be associated with a unique email address. So you need to, and you can find instructions on how to do that in those FAQs and the iSupplier presentation that I uploaded for you at the DFSS website. But you need to set up two unique email addresses within your account. Don't set up two iSupplier accounts. You only need one. One is more than enough for us all. But you need to, you'll need to set up two distinct email accounts and set up an application. Each application will be linked to one email account. If you try to do, if you don't do that, what happens is that you end up deleting one of the applications. And so we don't want that. I can't say this enough. There's a 4,000 character limit, and that includes punctuation and spaces. So 4,000 characters, it turns out, it's about like a single spaced page in the end of it all. But we ask some tough questions, and that's why we actually have a question that asks you to just write a narrative and upload it, because we thought that we wanted to get a question, we had a question that was just bigger than 4,000 characters, and we didn't want people to be pressured more than they already are. So with that 4,000 character limit, I will also say that in my experience, the e-procurement system will not tell you that you are over that limit. So you really need to, it will cut it off. We won't see it, but it won't necessarily tell you. So I really suggest that you write your answers, you fine tune them, you spell check them, you word check them, everything in the word processing program of your choice. Make sure that they're within the 4,000 character limit, and then cut and paste it into the application. One nice sort of feature about the e-procurement system is that you can submit your application early, and then if you decide you want to change it, up until that due date of May 15th, and that's a hard due date at noon. So we like to say, get in there early. We haven't had any significant glitches with this system, knock on wood, thus far, but there's a first for everything. But you can submit, and then if you are like, oh, I need to upload a resume, or I need to upload a different resume, or I don't really like my answer to this question, you can take it back and resubmit. And you can do that as many times as you want until May 15th at noon, which also goes to my next point of avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early. Once this application closes, and I think most people have sort of gotten the memo on this thus far, but at this point, is once that application closes, we cannot physically, we cannot accept an application. If we were to accept another application, the only way we can do it is to reopen the RFP or RFQ and have every person who had submitted it on time reapply, and then include the latecomers. So that's not fair to people who got their stuff in on time, and and it's also a huge burden in staff, so it really, we don't want to do this really ever. And it's, so really, please pay attention to that deadline. It's 12 o'clock noon. Finish it up on May 14th and press send would be my advice. I know that's it's hard to budget time, but really it's a hard deadline, and we will not accept applications. In terms of, I can't, here we go again with the e-procurement hotline. So we can, I think that I practically, if I was going to get a tattoo, I'm thinking maybe it would be that number. But just remember, call them. Don't call them if you have a programmatic question. That's called Rima. You can try to call me. You can call Tiffany. You really want to call Rima or Tiffany. I'll just probably email Rima or Tiffany and ask them. But the e-procurement hotline is like for stuff like I'm having a hard time getting into my account. I don't know how to add a person. Although all of those kinds of entry-level instructional questions are included in the documents I uploaded to the DFSS website. I think I'm ready for the next slide. Amazing. So with a complicated RFP such as this, and just in general, sometimes we have to do an addendum, or we want to notify everybody who's applying. If that happens, and I would say that it already has happened once with this particular RFP. It probably will happen again. I wouldn't be surprised. We like to avoid these things, but anyway, just in case it happens, if you've already started an application, you will have to acknowledge the amendment, the addendum. You'll see where the acknowledgement required in the screen, and then you're going to go down to the blue review changes and click on that. You'll review the changes, you accept the changes, and if you've already started an application, when you accept the changes, what it will do is it will pull your application, all of your information into this new addended RFP, RFQ. So you won't have to you don't have to redo anything, you don't have to retype anything. All you have to do is accept, and acknowledge the addendum. And I think actually it's if we do an amendment, it's really pretty hard to do anything without making the exception. Like it's sort of, the system kind of is like, yeah, you're going to accept this, right? Like it just keeps bugging you until you do it. And it won't let you see anything or work on anything until you do it. So, but that is how you do it. If you have problems or questions about that particular process, should we do an addendum, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I will do my best. I have a personal policy of trying to respond to people within 24 hours, which means that, there's a lot of people in the city who have my cell phone number. So we're going to come to the end of our fantastic webinar. I can't thank Rima and Tiffany enough for the beautiful job that they've done, as well as Tom for managing this whole thing. If you have program questions, again, we've set up actually a specific web email address just for program questions, so that we have them all, we capture them all, and that so Rima's personal email, her work email doesn't crash.
And they roll into the FAQs that we update on the website.
Yeah, and then this is going to roll into the FAQs, which will be updated on our website. And it might be one of those things we can send them. We'll send them to you. We'll post them on the website. We'll send them to people who already started applications. We might do an amendment to do FAQs. If you have a non-programmatic question, you can call the e-procurement hotline. You can call me. And we all will do the best we can to support and help you.
Yeah. So Julia, I just wanted to go ahead and point out that a lot of our existing agencies, they already have access to e-procurement iSupplier, and it may be just that someone in your organization needs to be added as a user.
Right.
But that's something that can happen within your organization, creating new users. And so I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that if you are already in there in some capacity, right? If somebody's already doing billings through there, they're creating invoices and things like that, that means your agency has access. So it's just a matter of getting then maybe someone else added as a new user, and maybe their responsibility is the online bidding portion. So wanted to call that out. As Julia had mentioned, there's a lot of resources out there that will help kind of guide that discussion. but definitely make sure that you pay attention to the email address that was identified as early learning RFP at thecityofchicago.org.
Right, and I know I can speak specifically to how do you, in the Delegate Agency FAQ iSupplier Portal e-procurement document that I uploaded onto the DFSS website, I know that specifically it does talk about how do you add or delete a new user. I'm looking to see what page number it is now. I feel like I'm on an infomercial. That I think it would be around, it's register my agency, so I think it's probably around page 6, 7, but it's in there. It's a PDF document. I'm sure if you do a search, you'll do a search, and then you'll get it. So shall we move on to questions?
Yeah. And I think what we're going to do, so if you haven't added a question but you want to, go ahead and add it now. We're just going to kind of take a couple of minutes to regroup around the questions, and we're going to categorize the questions. Just so I'm sure many of you, with 270 some people on the webinar, have asked the same question. So we just wanted to maximize our time. So we're going to categorize the questions, and then we're going to go ahead and begin. And anything we may not get to, there is the FAQ that we will respond to. Okay, so we'll be back in 2 minutes.
So hi, so we're looking at the questions. This is Julia Talbot. We're looking at the questions. I am going to be answering sort of what, the sort of your gateway questions, so to speak. Let's see. So we're scrolling around. Is there an FAQ specific to the technical portion of submitting their RFP? There is. It is posted on the DFSS website, and so that's one. We have a number of questions about how do I access different forms? You have to actually log into your iSupplier account to access the budget form, to see the appendices, to get, you know, sometimes a download of the RFP. I don't see anybody do that. In terms of how are you going to access this webinar post now, it will be posted to our YouTube channel. There will be a link on the DFSS website, and we probably will do kind of a blast email
To our CSD update.
A CSD update that will have the PowerPoint. It will have the YouTube link, and you know, we'll just throw some other FAQ and documents on there too. Here we go. Can you please clarify how an agency can submit more than one application for the RFP? Does that mean we can submit different models for category A and B? The way that you submit more than one application is that you set up unique email addresses that can be linked to unique applications. And you can submit one application for category A and one application for category B. You can have, as far as I can tell, up to 60 to like an infinite number of sites. Those sites may or may not be funded different ways, Tiffany.
Correct.
Looking at you.
Yeah.
So I don't see, we really try
And the
to...
multiple models, excuse me,
Yeah.
for that question, the multiple models would be within that one application. So for example, category A for birth to 3, if you may be applying for birth to 3 center-based, early Head Start or PI, or both, and home visiting, PI and early Head Start, or both. And so, but it's still one application.
Correct.
Different funding sources and different models. The 2 applications focus on the age group.
Now, how do 2 or more people work on the RFP on iSupplier if they have 2 separate logins? Well, they're not going to be working collaboratively. The e-procurement site is built off of an Oracle platform. It doesn't share. It will just kick you, if you try to get 2 people working on the same application, it will really just kick the person who was logged in first off, and then they will have to re-log in. So it's I think the answer, unfortunately, to that question is that it's not going to happen. How do you have to upload the proposal to e-procurement? So the application can only be accessed on the e-procurement site, and you're going to answer all the questions in the e-procurement environment, and you're going to upload the narrative question, your budget, a number of other things that are articulated as in where the instructions say please upload, and that's going to be your application. You're not going to do an application, upload it. You upload resumes, you upload your financial statements, you upload your budget pages, but the application questions, those are not uploaded. Here, can more than one staff have loggers to iSupplier? Yes, Med Colbert, more than one staff. You can have pretty much as many staff if you want having access to iSupplier. And in fact, that the instructions on how to do that are in the Delegate Agency Frequently Asked Questions for the iSupplier portal, or the Delegate Agency iSupplier presentation, which is posted on the DFSS website.
True. I just wanted to, this is Tiffany, and I just wanted to caution folks about making sure that when you're adding users, just to understand that they can also see other things if you give them access to it. And so you have to decide and determine those internal controls that you want to have. Because when you're in iSupplier, you can give a new user access to the invoice creation, or you can give them access to the online bidding, the RFP part of it. Or you can give them access to both of those things. So just make sure that you're being intentional about how to approach this if you're going to have or be creating multiple users.
Okay. So now, are we talking about, is there a fillable RFP form? No, there is not a fillable RFP form. There is a fillable budget template, which you can download through by logging into your iSupplier account. That's the only way you're going to get it, though. And where can you secure a copy of the actual RFP? You can secure a copy of the actual RFP by logging into your iSupplier account and downloading the attachment from there. There was a question that I think we scrolled past that was about that somebody had registered for an iSupplier account and then they got an email saying they already had one. You don't want two iSupplier accounts. You really only want one. There's somebody in your organization who knows where that account is. If you absolutely can't figure out who has it, give me a call. I will try and look it up for you, and we can talk about how you're going to get access to your existing account. But please only have one iSupplier account. The iSupplier account is what we use. It's it's contract birth to contract death with this thing. And so if you have two accounts, it's going to mess up. If you get contracts, it's going to mess up your contracts and your funding strips and all, not the funding strips, but how we're going to, if you want to do an ETF, like how we're going to pay out. You really just want the one's account. Don't set up another one.
Mm-hmm.
So looking around, we can say, where can we find the budget template online? It's in the iSupplier. It's in the RFP that you can access through iSupplier. If you go to the website, and you can get a copy of the RFP off of just the e-procurement web,
the city's website for online bidding.
You click on the little glasses thing, which I thought was an infinity sign for a really long time. And so that will be that, but it won't give you those attachments. So in terms of where I'm looking here, and it's where the budget forms. Let's see, what else do we have in here?
There was a question I saw somebody asked.
Oh yeah, here we go. RFP. If we're submitting an RFP, do we have, for both PI and PFA, do we need to use two email addresses?
Yes.
No, you don't, because the Tiffany's Magic Budget Form will encompass all funding streams.
So it will encompass all funding streams. However, you still will need to do two applications because PI is in category A and PFA is in category B. Yeah. So you use the same budget template, but you will need to go ahead and do two applications with the same budget template.
Which means two email addresses.
Which means two email addresses.
Okay.
Yeah. Like a trick question.
So that's, yeah. No, wait a minute. Also related to that, somebody asked if you're applying for PI, Early Head Start, and Home Base, and if it's Home Base is PI, if it's birth to 3, then it's only one application. Somebody asked that question about that. So it's only one application. Just think about it per age group, right? So one application per age group.
So here we have, if we attended the webinar, is it necessary to attend the in-person bidders conference? No, we are thrilled that you attended the webinar. If the in-person bidders conference didn't work out, there aren't times that are going to work for you. It's really, you can do this for your own self. If you feel like you know what you're doing, you're on top of it, we've answered all your questions, you don't really need to see any of us in person, then by all means, live your life. But we'll be there, and if you have questions, and you want to get a little bit more hands-on, or you have a specific question, those in-person bidders conferences are the time to really meet with us and get specific questions answered at one place, or really clarify whatever it is that you are that you are unclear on. How are the appendices accessed? The appendices are accessed via your iSupplier account. That's the only place. We are not posting any of this stuff to the DFSS website. I don't think we're putting it on COPA. We're not doing, it's just that iSupplier account. And let's see, I see a number of you can't find the template online. It's at the iSupplier account. That's all there is.
So we're just going to pause for another couple of minutes to shift from some of the technical questions and categorize some of the other questions. So thanks for your patience, and we'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Tiffany Junkins, and so we're back on. We just wanted to go ahead and try and answer some questions as it relates to some of the budgetary questions that you had. We have a question about the financial statements, and it says for what year. So the audited financial statements, as we reference, it will always be for the previous year. So once they're audited and you have a final report, then those are the financial statements that we want to see. So that may be from the previous year. It all depends on where you are in your audit process. The next question, can you be a delegate for just a part of your program? So I'm going to assume that you're asking if you can be maybe a grantee, or if you can be a partner and also be a delegate. And so the answer is yes. You can be a delegate who receives, for instance, PFA and PI, or early childhood block grant funding, because you can only apply from a delegate standpoint for the block grant funding. But then perhaps maybe you're a partner, though, with somebody else for federal funding. So that can happen, yes. A question is asked about the annual audit. So there is an annual audit that's required if you're receiving $750,000 or more in federal funds. And you can find that in the uniform guidance. So 45 CFR Part 75, also 2, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 200. You can kind of look up more information about the annual audit. There's a question about uploading the current annual report from what source. The annual report is required for our federal funds. So the annual report is required for our federal funds, and that is something that can be uploaded as well. There's a question about Category A funding stream. It says, can you please repeat the Category A funding stream restrictions for center-based? So the PowerPoint slide, it's going to be available for everybody to see. So we're going to make sure that we make this available. Rima, I don't know if you necessarily want to go through the different options. Category A is going to be for infants and toddlers.
It's early Head Start. So early Head Start, you can apply for early Head Start either home-based or center-based and family child care homes. Early Head Start Child Care Partnership is specifically center-based or family child care homes, but not home visiting. And Prevention Initiative, center-based or home visiting, but not family child care homes. We're just going to reference really quick. I think there was another slide that maybe said to pay attention to the restriction. And I think that restriction was really maybe more Head Start. Okay, and what can't be blended together? So center-based, so early Head Start and early Head Start CCP cannot be blended together. And in home visiting, PI and early Head Start cannot be blended together.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so want to make sure that we're not losing you. We're trying to take a look at the questions and read the questions so that we can go ahead and address them. So at times where you hear us go silent, it's because we're trying to organize the questions. That way we can go ahead and address them. So there's a question regarding the maximum rate for the executive level 2 salary cap. And it's currently at $189,600. So the question was, would I be able to allocate the 189 to DFSS funded programs, but then an additional part of their salary, which may be 20,000 more, can it be paid for out of other sources of funds? And so the answer is no. If a salary is capped at 189,600, it's capped. So if the person makes $1 over the maximum cap, none of the salary can be charged to any of our funding sources. I want to make that very clear that that is the cap. And so if someone exceeds, they need to be paid for out of a different funding source, period. Can a delegate agency be approved for a cognizant rate higher than the 10% administrative costs? So no, 10% is going to be the cap for programs applying for the federally funded portion of our program, and 5% if they're applying for our state early childhood block grant funds. It will not be negotiated. We put it in the request for proposal, so that is the rate, and it's not going to be negotiated. There is a question. It says, can you fund a child for both early Head Start and PI center-based? The answer is yes. You can have one child have both funding streams. They can be early Head Start, and they can also be a PI in that center-based option. Have another question. Is the application an all or nothing? If you apply to be a Head Start delegate and a PFA, is it also possible that you can be awarded PFA but not the Head Start delegate status, and vice versa? No. So it is not an all or nothing. You can apply for as many funding streams as you would like to apply for. And there is a possibility that some may be awarded for some options, some program models, and others may not. So that is a reality. We don't have endless amount of funds. So we're going to take all of those things into consideration. So it is possible that you could be awarded for one and not the other. Hi, this is Tiffany Junkins back. I just wanted to let you guys know that we have an abundance of questions, and we're very excited about that. I know that we're going to be on a time restriction, though, as this webinar will end at 3:30. So some of the questions we will be able to answer, and then others we will have to fold into our FAQ. We will also make sure that we're addressing some of these questions at the bidders conferences as well. But I just wanted to let you know that we'll try and get to as many questions as we can during the time that we have you, maybe for another 30 minutes or so. But all of the questions we won't be able to address on this platform.
Okay, so getting back to the questions, since there's a question that says, since Early Head Start does not recognize teacher assistants in infant toddler classrooms, meaning that they are both need to be teacher qualified, should I presume that the minimum salary and qualification requirements apply for any birth to 3 classroom proposing to use Early Head Start funds? And the answer to that is yes, and with the caveat that the salary minimums were connected also to the credentials and the degrees.
So there's a question about if you have 3 sites, you know, would you like to have as one agency? Is it possible? And so we're expecting that the proposal would be submitted under the agency, and each agency has the ability to have 1 or more sites that they're operating. And so that's okay. If you have 3 sites that you like to include under the agency's umbrella, that is okay, and that is the expectation.
So there's a question that says, how many previous delegate agencies participated in the last program cycle, and how many contracts are available this cycle? Please go to page 38 in the RFP, and that lists the current number of contracts per funding source.
So there's a question about the cognizant rate that exceeds 20% for admin. I've mentioned this before, but our administrative rates are capped with our federal grants at 10% and also 5% with our early childhood block grant, which is our state funding. So if an administrative rate exceeds 20%, it's not going to be allowed with our funding sources. The next question is regarding iSupplier. Will multiple users or multiple people within an agency be allowed to work on the grant at the same time? And no, you won't be able to. You know, you're submitting a maximum of 2 proposals. So, you know, 1 for category A and 1 for category B, and you shouldn't be in there at the same time. You shouldn't be in there at the same time.
Okay, we're just gonna pause for another couple of minutes and regroup around the questions, and we'll be back. Thanks.
So just for clarification, if an agency is an I supplier and someone else within your organization has a different email address and they're also going to be an I supplier, and maybe they're working on the budget piece with, kind of uploading the budget template, and maybe someone else is working on programmatic questions, that can happen under 2 different users. That's okay.
Okay, and then somebody asked the question around if you've previously been a Head Start partner and now are going to apply to be a delegate, and if you are not awarded under delegate, can you still also be can you go back and be the partner? And so that will only be able to happen if the delegate, the separate delegate organization has actually put you in their budget template, put your organization as a partner, since this is a proposal and an application. But if your site or agency is not listed as a partner, then under this RFP, that would not be able to happen.
There is a question about the DFS website and us mentioning the website. And the question is asking if we can share the link to the DFS website. We can ensure that we put out information in our CSD update to address the website that we're referencing. And also at the bidders conference, we can also reiterate that as well.
And there have been, you can also get to it if you go to the City of Chicago website, excuse me, and go to drop down for Department of Family Support Services, then there's a click for Children's Services Division. Excuse me.
So there's a question, it says, if a delegate agency has both partners and directly operated sites, can the agency apply for Early Head Start for partners and directly operated sites, and for PI, Prevention Initiative, for the directly operated sites on the same 0 to 3 application? And the answer is yes, you can do that. There was a question regarding budgeting and defining what unrestricted funds are. And so unrestricted funds are going to be your corporate funds or local funds. Really, they're discretionary funds that you have to be able to do things that you need to do that are not necessarily restricted. Our grants are considered restricted funds because they're for a specific purpose. But if your organization has unrestricted dollars, it's because they're your corporate funds, they're your local funds that you may not necessarily have those restrictions on them.
There's a question about if you apply for Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, will all sites need to operate with that model, or can one site operate with Early Head Start and the other Early Head Start Child Care Partnership? And yes, one site can operate with Early Head Start and the other Early Head Start Child Care Partnership.
So there's a question about how this request for proposal will impact current contracts. And so for current contracts, we have already submitted a request to extend current contracts that end June the 30th, 2019 to the end of September. So we've submitted the request already to the Office of Budget and Management, and we are waiting on approval for that extension because we understand that this RFP process is going to take us some time to get new contracts out. You know, we'll kind of give more information as more information becomes available to us in terms of that request being approved. So there is a question. The question is the goal to serve 15 per classroom to ensure quality care instead of 17 as stated in the RFP for predominant age 3 years old? So we understand that, you know, that some classrooms on average don't necessarily contain all DFSS funding. And so one of the ways we tried to show that through the RFP was given the example of there may be 17 in the classroom, but maybe 15 may only be funded through us, you know, and then the other 2 could be funded by a different source as being an example, because depending on the community that you're in, that may be a reality. So again, we want you to think about how you're going to submit your proposal and what the need is in your community and apply for the slots that you feel that you need according to the community area that you're in.
There's a question about if there are any charter schools currently using CPS funding for their pre-K program. Is that allowable under the Illinois charter law? Our charter is for K through 8. And so when you see in the RFP where it says for those interested in pursuing funding through CPS, that is specifically about the early childhood block grant and preschool for all through CPS. Not the K through 8 funding. Currently, I'm not sure, I don't believe any charter schools are receiving that, but this is under conversation with CPS.
The next question, can PFA and Head Start be combined for the same child? The answer is yes. In our center-based options, that can happen. The next question is, can PI and Early Head Start be combined? And the answer is yes. that can also happen in our center-based option. Is there a priority given to any classrooms? It says braided funding model. And so one of the things that we have communicated through this RFP is that we're encouraging agencies to consider blending.
So a question about who administers the class, the center themselves or someone else. So it can be the organization. The organization may do that. Some organizations are having some of their staff get class certified so they can do the class. In addition to that, though, DFSS is conducting the class on all classrooms, center-based and family childcare homes, birth through 5, and is in that process and has the goal of doing this annually.
Someone asked a question about the non-federal match for our federally funded programs being at 33%. The match requirement is actually 1/3 of the federal dollar. So it's actually 1/3. So it'll be 33.33333 and everlasting. But yes, so the non-federal match is also mentioned in the RFP as well, and still a requirement then for the federal funding.
Okay, I think there was a question about supplemental for PFA. So for clarity, if PFA only programs want to add supplemental positions, as described, are you telling us this is only allowable for Head Start agencies? And that is correct. It is only allowable for Head Start agencies.
Yeah, and there's a question too about accessing the budget template. And do I need to go through the iSupplier in order to access it? So yes, you would need to go to iSupplier in order to access the budget template. Someone mentioned that they, I guess, have a copy of the RFP, but they didn't have the budget template. You need to log into eProcurement iSupplier in order to access any of the attachments. Where can I obtain the budget template? Again, you have to log into eProcurement or iSupplier in order to obtain the template.
There's a question about standards being aligned. How are agencies allowed to use teachers who possess a CDA, meaning are they allowed in a PFA or PI classroom? And no, so the purpose of aligning the standards was to go to the highest quality indicator of one of those funders. And so actually what that means is that for early Head Start and Head Start programs, we'll need to have a plan to start to move towards meeting a higher requirement than CDA, and it is listed in there in terms of we are also aligning with Illinois gateways, and so credential 3 or 4, we have to look at that.
There's a question about if you have a Head Start as a community partner, but do not have early Head Start, can you apply for early Head Start only and then remain a Head Start partner? Again, you don't have to apply for all of the funding streams. And so, you know, if it is your proposal to apply for early Head Start funding through DFSS, you can do that, even if it is your intention to remain a partner organization under someone else who is applying as their proposal. So that is okay. You can do that.
And for the different age groups, right?
Yes.
So for Head Start, be a partner, and you're applying under early Head Start as a delegate.
Yep, that's okay.
So, sorry if you guys noticed, we might have gotten disconnected for a minute, but we're back, and there's a question around, do you apply for each model and combination, or one application requesting all, but may be approved for one and not the other? So let's just clarify. As an organization, you want to decide, are you applying for both birth to 3 and 3 to 5? So that's the first question, right? So if you only want to do 3 to 5, then that's one application. If you only want to do birth to 3, that's one application. If you want to do both age groups, then that's 2 applications. Then within that, you may be applying for multiple funding streams as well as for multiple models. So for example, you might apply for early Head Start center-based and early Head Start home-based, or PI center-based and PI home-based, and you might apply for all of those 2 different funding streams and 4 different models under altogether. That makes sense? So that depends on your organization. What you're awarded, you may be awarded portions of what you have applied for. Hopefully that makes sense, but we'll also write that out in an FAQ. And you'll have an opportunity to ask it again, either by email to earlylearningrfp@cityofchicago.org, or my email that's on this, or at one of our in-person bidders conference.
And just for clarity, I think what Rima had mentioned was clear, but because there's another question up there at the same time, if you're applying for early Head Start and you're applying for Head Start, that's two different proposals, two different applications, okay? Want to be very clear.
So we have about 5 minutes. So we're just going to kind of, again, as Tiffany had mentioned, we're not going to be able to address all. We had over 180 questions, but we're trying to kind of hit the most common ones, and especially those that impact as you're just trying to get started on the RFP and the process for application. And then we will make sure that we have a very detailed FAQ that goes out. In addition, we will be addressing these questions at our in-person bidders conferences. But we'll take a couple more before we totally close out. So there's a question around what if we don't have all the potential partner sites before the due date?
So this is a proposal, right? And so if you don't know or haven't established your plan by the due date, then you have to go ahead and apply for what you actually do have, because this RFP is going to require you to have certain information, such as the license number of the site that you're actually going to be applying for, the classrooms that are going to be associated with that site. And so there has to be some dialogue with a partner site in advance prior to them being included in your RFP. If those conversations have not happened and you don't have the information to submit during proposals, then they can't be included because they're not a part of the plan by the due date.
There was just another clarifying question. Can you clarify and speak to PI and PI home base? Is that one application? So yes, one application. Prevention initiative is for birth to 3, so one application birth to 3, one application 3 to 5. So PI center base, PI home base, both one application, 2 different models. So there's a question about where to go to find, either as questions arise, who to submit it to. And so submit it to Early Learning, RFP, at cityofchicago.org. That's Early Learning, RFP, at cityofchicago.org. And then as a reminder, all those questions are then twice or three times a week updated on the FAQ that sits on the website. And again, the website can be accessed if you go to the City of Chicago website and go to DFSS and then click on Children's Services Division. If you click all the way on the bottom, there's an alert, and click on alerts and you will see the FAQ there. And it is 3:34. And so we are going to sign off, but rest assured we are going to answer these questions that we did not get to, both in the FAQ as well as when there are the in-person bidders conference. So everyone gets out and enjoys the day today, and see maybe most of you at the bidders conference. All right, bye.